Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the T.H.O Movie Reviews podcast, the show where we bring you passionate, honest, and insightful film criticism. Although it's not technically a podcast today, because you can see me for a change. I'm your host, Bennett Campbell Ferguson, and I'm here today with a very, very special edition of our show. I've been feeling very, very concerned about the state of the Star Wars fan galaxy. Ever since The Last Jedi opened, last December, I feel like we've been in crisis, and I admit I've been a part of fueling the constant bickering. Yes, I am one of the many people who dislike the film, and I've been very vocal about it, and I stand by everything I've said. However, I have come to realize that this can't go on. We cannot go on fighting amongst ourselves. We have to reaffirm our common purpose as Star Wars fans. We have to accept the fact that we all love Star Wars very much, and because we love it, we're going to have strong opinions, and those opinions aren't going to go away. We're never all going to agree on what a great Star Wars movie should be necessarily, but I think that we can move past that, and we can all unite and say, hey, we may disagree, but we love this amazing, beautiful, wonderful universe that George Lucas created. So I was thinking to myself, what can I do to help with this, to help reaffirm this common purpose as Star Wars fans? And then it came to me. I am, as of today, starting a YouTube tag, My Star Wars Story. This is where you, if you're a diehard Star Wars fan like I am, or a casual fan, doesn't matter as long as you're a fan, it's a tag where you answer questions that I have chosen about your Star Wars fandom and what kind of fan you are, and, you know, just your general thoughts on your personal experiences as a Star Wars fan. I've come up with 5 questions, although one of them kind of cheats because it has several parts. They are in the comments section below, so I encourage you to make your own videos like this using the tag My Star Wars Story. And without further ado, I'm going to get the ball rolling and start answering these questions myself. So if you'll bear with me just a sec, gotta grab my handy dandy notebook. Here it is. The first Star Wars question I have is, when did you first become a Star Wars fan? Well, I first became a Star Wars fan when I was about 10 years old. I was in 5th grade. I grew up in Portland, Oregon, went to Edwards Elementary. And I grew up very into movies. Mostly I watched like old movies, musicals, that kind of thing. But I didn't watch a lot of science fiction. And my best friend in school, he saw Star Wars, was getting really into Star Wars. And he would tell me stories about, you know, the characters and the story and what happened. And even just listening to him, I was entranced. I wanted to be a part of that. And, you know, I started imagining, you know, things like, you know, the final duel between Luke and Darth Vader and the Emperor's throne room on the second Death Star in my mind. Eventually, I slept over at his house. We watched the first movie. A bit later, my mom and I got a VHS tape. That's how long ago this was. We got a VHS tape from the local library of The Empire Strikes Back. Watched that, and finally, I completed my original trilogy education by throwing a little party at my house where I had a bunch of friends over. We drank root beer, and we all watched Return of the Jedi. And that was it. I was made a fan in those months when I first encountered the original trilogy. The second question is, what is it about Star Wars that first made you fall in love with the saga? For me, answering that is very, very complicated. You see, I love Star Wars in a very different way now than I did when I first became entranced by it. How did I love Star Wars at the beginning? Well, I mean, I loved Star Wars in, you know, a very kind of playful, sort of down-to-earth way that, you know, was kind of actually divorced from the movies themselves. You know, certainly when I first saw the original trilogy, I liked the movies. I liked them a lot. But I didn't love them the way I love them now. You know, really back then when I was, you know, 10 years old and, you know, continuing on when I was, you know, a little older in middle school and was a tween or whatever you want to call it, you know, I was really more into the world of Star Wars. You know, I was into, you know, playing games with my friends where we play Star Wars characters, you know, I remember my friend who got me into Star Wars, he threw a Star Wars costume party, you know. I made my own Boba Fett costume at his house out of cardboard and wore it, and, you know, we went and played on the playground, you know. I was into stuff like that, you know. I was into collecting the action figures, you know. I would read the comics, you know. It was a very different kind of experience than I have now. You know, what happened is, as I got older, I became more than a Star Wars fan, just a general movie fan, just someone who was in love with movies, and I stopped, you know, being the kind of guy who would, you know, want to like read sort of Star Wars reference books about how all the spaceships, you know, worked, kind of the in-universe explanations, like, oh, you know, the Millennium Falcon was made in this shipyard, blah blah blah, and I became more interested in the stories as, you know, as just fiction, as movies, you know, as works of art, and in particular, what I became fascinated by was the journey of Luke Skywalker and how he goes from being, you know, this young, naive guy who views the world in very, very simple terms, and then he grows up and, you know, is faced with the fact that his father is an evil man, tries to redeem him, and is forced to, you know, take on, you know, a sadder, wiser, more complicated, but, you know, ultimately more humanist version of the galaxy. And I think that's a really, really, really beautiful thing, and that's why I love Star Wars today. That's what's really, you know, what ultimately took my fandom from just kind of liking the whole Star Wars experience to absolutely loving these movies with all my heart and soul. Question 3. How would you describe your generation of Star Wars fans? Now look, this is all subjective stuff. Bear with me, you know, and it's even hard to classify like where a generation of Star Wars fans begins and ends. But, you know, my generation, one thing you have to understand about us is, you know, we were seeing the prequels at the time they were in theaters, and we were seeing them at a very young age, you know. And to be honest, and I think I speak for, you know, a lot of people in my, you know, Star Wars fan social circle back then, you know, back in the, you know, early 2000s, you know, we were too dumb to realize they were bad, you know. It's true. It's true. I'm sorry to any of my friends out there if that offends you, but it's true, and I'm absolutely speaking for myself. You know, I think because, you know, I don't know. I think, you know, we were easily pleased, you know, by the cool CGI and the speeder chase and the pod race and Darth Maul, you know. So, you know, we came to Star Wars, I think, and, you know, especially to the prequels, because they were, you know, the Star Wars, you know, movies that were coming out in our formative fan years. I think we came to them, you know, from a very pure place, you know, thinking they were very cool, you know. I remember, you know, at lunch, you know, sitting with a friend of mine, you know, back in grade school, in 5th grade, you know, he was speculating about what might happen in Episode 3. Episode 2 had just come out. You know, I remember, you know, talking excitedly with, you know, my fellow fans at the time about Darth Sidious and Darth Maul and that kind of thing, you know? I mean, oh, you know, you hear about, you know, fans like getting very angry about the prequels when they came out, you know, especially, you know, I think probably the older fans, you know, but, you know, those of us like me who were young when they were coming out, you know, we thought they were the coolest thing ever, you know. I remember loving, and I still love this part, but, you know, that awesome duel between Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon and Darth Maul, which, you know, is just so beautifully choreographed by Nick Gillard, who did the fight choreography on those films. But, you know, you get a little older, that changes things, you know. As I grew up, you know, my tolerance for the just horribly written Anakin Padme love scenes, you know, I don't like sand, it's rough, it's coarse, it's irritating, and the guts everywhere, you know. I mean, you get a little older, your tolerance for that goes poof, way out the window, I am telling you. And I think, you know, I sort of lost a little bit of the wonder, you know, a little bit of that fervor, you know, and eventually, you know, became a real original trilogy purist. But, you know, I gotta say, I find it too hard to regret it that much, you know. I can still go back and watch the prequels, you know, I can still have fun with them, I can still rekindle a little bit of the magic, you know. I still feel, you know, a touch of excitement, you know, when, you know, you think Anakin and Padme and Obi-Wan are about to be, you know, shot by battle droids, and then, you know, out of nowhere come, you know, Mace Windu and all the Jedi, and, you know, a huge arena battle unfolds, you know. I still think that stuff is, you know, really cool, you know. But, no, I mean, I'm an original trilogy guy through and through now. That is absolutely where it's at for me. The fourth question, okay, this is the one that gets pretty crazy. This is the one where you have to name all your favorite Star Wars things. Your favorite Star Wars movie, favorite scene, favorite character, favorite music track, favorite book, favorite comic book, favorite video game, and favorite toy. I'm going to take them one at a time, if you don't mind. My favorite Star Wars movie, Return of the Jedi. A controversial choice, I'm well aware of that, and I don't care, because it is absolutely my favorite. You know, I think I went through, you know, a bit of a phase where I was a little embarrassed to admit, you know, that, you know, my favorite was Return of the Jedi, because it's not cool to like the one that has the Ewoks, you know? I mean, it's, you know, if you're a real purist, you're supposed to, you know, say, like, The Empire Strikes Back is the best and nothing will ever top that. And don't get me wrong, The Empire Strikes Back is a masterpiece. It is one of the greatest films in the history of cinema, hands down, no question. But Return of the Jedi is my favorite, and the reason it's my favorite is I just think it's, you know, it's really, really amazing. You know, in The Empire Strikes Back, you have Luke learning that Darth Vader is his father. And, you know, he's initiated into a more complex moral universe where good and evil are not so easily defined. But, you know, what does it mean to live in that universe? Well, you know, Return of the Jedi is the movie that explores that. And I think there's something amazing about the idea that Luke has been trained, you know, by Obi-Wan and Yoda, and they're telling him, no, you have to face your father, and, you know, it's implied, well, you have to kill him. He decides, you know, no, I've learned enough to, you know, trust in my faith, in my belief that, you know, even the worst person in the galaxy, or, you know, second worst, Emperor Palpatine, can be redeemed. And his faith in that idea is tested. You know, Palpatine and Vader really work on him, and he eventually sees the darkness in himself and finds that the only way to resist it is just to surrender, to throw his lightsaber away, to say my favorite line in the series, you know, no, you failed, Your Highness. I'm a Jedi, like my father before me. I missed a part of that. It's, no, I'll never turn to the dark side. You failed, Your Highness. I am a Jedi, like my father before me. And then that sacrifice, you know, him choosing peace over war, in Star Wars, no less, that's what inspires Darth Vader to redeem himself. I think that's an incredible journey. You know, it's my favorite part of the Star Wars legacy, and it's, for me, what makes Return of the Jedi the most exciting, the most emotional, the most wonderful, wonderful film in the series. Favorite scene? Well, surprise, surprise, my favorite Star Wars scene is, in fact, from Return of the Jedi. Excuse me, just need a glass of water here. It's a shame this isn't blue milk, by the way. But yeah, my favorite scene in all of Star Wars is from Return of the Jedi, but it may not be from where you'd expect. It is actually not, you know, the final duel between Luke and Vader or anything like that. It is actually the Ewok dance party at the end, where everyone comes together. And what I love about that is all these characters in Star Wars have suffered so much, you know, and not just the main characters, you know, because you have, I mean, of course you have, you know, Han being put through carbonite, you know, the destruction of Alderaan, the deaths of Obi-Wan and Yoda, but even more than that, you know, you've got all the things the other characters, you know, have endured. You know, you've got, you know, Lando Calrissian, you know, losing his entire livelihood and having to, you know, remake himself. And of course you've got what Luke's been through. He's been through hell. And I think there is something just so magnificent of seeing everyone come together as a family, you know, having achieved their goal, having destroyed the Empire, and finally they can relax, they can be happy together, they can hug each other. I love, you know, all the different, you know, takes in that scene of, you know, people just relaxing and hugging each other, you know, from Han and Lando to Han and Luke, and, you know, just that wonderful moment of, you know, the spirits of Anakin, Obi-Wan and Yoda looking out at Luke, you know, approvingly, kind of, you know, as if to say, you did the right thing, you know, you forged your own path. We advise, Obi-Wan and Yoda advised him one way, advised him, to strike down his father, essentially. And there's a sense of, he's grown up, he's forged his own destiny. And then the very last shot of the trilogy is everybody all together, kind of facing the camera, almost as if they're posing for a family photo. And I think there's something really sweet about that, because at the end, what is Star Wars about? It is about friends. It is about family. I think one of the most amazing things in the whole series is at the end of A New Hope, Luke, Han, and Leia, they walk out of the hangar after Luke has destroyed the Death Star, and they kind of have thrown their arms over each other's shoulders. And it's the first time when there's no antagonism between any of them in the movie. They've spent a lot of time bickering. Han and Leia have been bickering. Han and Luke have been bickering. There's been this divisiveness this whole time, and you see them reveling in just pure love for each other. And I think that's what Star Wars comes down to. Star Wars, like any saga worth its salt, is about love, and that all comes to fruition in my favorite scene in Jedi. All right, moving right along. Favorite character? That's really tough. I mean, in one sense, I would say Luke, because, he's the most interesting character to me. He's a young man struggling to come of age. I certainly identify with that a lot, But by the way, it's weird. I'm 27 now, so I guess I'm a lot older than Luke was supposed to be in those original movies, which is like crazy, crazy thought. But my favorite character in terms of just favorite, not the one I relate to, not the one I find the most interesting. I mean, who can you go with but Darth Vader? I mean, as I said, I'm not so down, I'm not so cool with the prequels these days, I've really come to resent sort of the demystification of Darth Vader, through showing him as Anakin Skywalker in those films. So to me, Vader is this mythical figure who emerges onto Tantive 4, Princess Leia's ship, in A New Hope, breathing heavy, sweeping in with his black cape, and, you don't know what's behind that mask. All you know that here is this menace, this enigma, this mystery, who inspires fear, and occasionally a kind of, macabre sense of humor with the way he deals with his subordinates so ruthlessly. It's really kind of funny, you all know what I'm talking about, apology accepted, Captain Nida, and I think it's so extraordinary to have, just this thrillingly, just deliciously evil character, and then to humanize him, kind of the prequels, sort of gradually vilify Anakin Skywalker. A New Hope, in the original trilogy, they take a much more interesting journey, and they take it in reverse, because they take a villain, they slowly humanize him, really, starting with, the moment in A New Hope, when he, is following Luke in his TIE fighter and says, the Force is strong with this one, maybe he's starting to sense, the presence of his son, and then going into, Empire, where we first get a glimpse of him very briefly, very tactfully, which I love, just a glimpse of him without the mask, but also see him, trying to save his son, he could be a powerful ally if he could be turned, and all that, he's trying to protect his son's life, and you're seeing the vulnerability, and then you get into Return of the Jedi, and, he's even more drawn to his son, and, even more, determined to turn him to the dark side, because what does he have left? He's this evil, miserable figure. The love of his child is all he has left. And, I think it's extraordinary to take him from those first moments in the first film where he's the epitome of evil, to take him to Return of the Jedi, when, you see him, pale and broken and human with his mask off. And by the way, hear an ambulance or a cop car or something. Sorry about that. Nothing I can do. I can't use the Force to silence it or anything. That would be horrible. But, and by the way, I just want to address something really quick. I know there are some people, who don't like the idea of Darth Vader redeeming himself, who, think like, oh, that's like, showing it there's good in Hitler. But you gotta understand, I don't think that, the films necessarily absolve Vader of his crimes. I think I don't think the point is that, you know, he turns back to the good side and suddenly, you know, everything bad that he did is undone. I don't think that's the point at all, and I resent anyone who thinks that. I think the point is that even in the most evil of human beings, there can be a spark of good. You know, there can still be that last bit of energy that could inspire, you know, a horrible dictator to sacrifice himself for the love of another person. I think that's a beautiful thing, and honestly, I think that's something everyone should take to heart, because I think it's central to the Star Wars saga, and it's something worth remembering, all of us, as we go through life. Excuse me while I take another sip. Okay, this is a long question. Next question. Favorite Star Wars music track? I mean, you know, it's gotta be Binary Sunset. You know, Luke watching the twins sunset and No Hope, you know how it goes. Ba da 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 da, etc., etc., etc. I mean, don't get me wrong, you know, I love all the main classic themes, you know, the Imperial March, you know, of course, the main title that plays over the text crawl, you know, all those are extraordinary. But the Binary Sunset theme, you know, I suppose there are other names for it, you know, like some people call it the Force theme, you know, whatever. To me, it's the Binary Sunset theme, you know. To me, that's a really incredible theme because it's the personal side of Star Wars. It shows the emotional side, you know. Luke goes out, watches the twin sunset, you know. That scene is all about, you know, his most personal dreams, his dreams of, you know, wandering the galaxy, of adventuring, of, you know, doing something bigger and grander. You know, it's the song that, you know, shows what he's thinking and feeling, and it really comes to, you know, define, you know, the most personal moments for all the characters. You know, it plays again when Luke, you know, burns his father's body, and, you know, really showing, you know, look how far he's come. He came from being that kid who was just, you know, longing to adventure for, you know, someone who's, you know, much more sober, you know, and much more of an adult, for better or worse. And I just think it's an extraordinary piece of music. I know, you know, it goes without saying, but John Williams, wow, you know, a lot of amazing composers working today. You know, Hans Zimmer, Stephen Price, John Ottman, you know, but John Williams is always going to be number one for me. You know, probably him and James Horner, I'd say. Okay, book. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't read a lot of Star Wars books. I don't. The ones I've read, to be honest, and I know this is sacrilege, maybe I just haven't read the right ones, but a lot of the ones I found the writing to be not so good. But however, growing up, I did love these young adult Boba Fett books. They were really compelling. I love how they, you know, kind of explore Boba Fett after Attack of the Clones. You know, show him as a kid alone in the galaxy who has lost his father. You know, I think like you know, he's 10 or 11 maybe, or maybe he's 13. I can't remember. But you know, he is totally alone. You know, he doesn't have anyone to look after him. He has to make his own way in the universe. And you think about that. That's really incredible. You know, that's, you know, all the other characters in Star Wars. You know, well, they had mentors to guide them. You know, Boba Fett doesn't really have that. You know, he just kind of has to forge his own destiny on his own, which may explain why he becomes a villainous bounty hunter. But, you know, it's a really extraordinary story, and, you know, it shows some of the kind of ethical conundrums he faces as an orphan, you know, trying to survive alone in the galaxy, you know, as a guy who, you know, doesn't really belong with, you know, the Confederacy, you know, led by Count Dooku, that his father worked for, but doesn't really belong with the Republic or the Jedi either, because, you know, they're the ones who killed his father. So, you know, I think it's a really, really interesting story, and, you know, even if, you know, you're older, I'd say they're still worth a read. They're interesting books. First one's called Boba Fett: The Fight to Survive. The next one is called Boba Fett: Crossfire. They're both quite good. Favorite Star Wars comic book? Star Wars, long time ago. Screams in the Void. This is an incredible book. It collects some of the old classic Star Wars Marvel comics. So, by the way, it's funny that, you know, Star Wars started at Marvel and then you went to Dark Horse, but then came back around to Marvel when Disney bought the whole thing. But that's a side tangent. We won't go down that road. This particular volume of the A Long Time Ago series takes place in between The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. And I think that's a really interesting time period, because you have a Luke Skywalker who is humbled and has learned that, you know, Darth Vader is his father, but doesn't know for sure if that's true yet. So he's in a much more vulnerable place than he was right before The Empire Strikes Back, you know. But he isn't able to sort of address those concerns yet. That's not necessarily directly addressed in these books, but I think it makes that whole period interesting. But what makes Screams in the Void a particularly interesting collection of comic books is that, you know, it has this incredible arc where we see Luke accidentally kill another rebel pirate in an attack on an Imperial Star Destroyer. And it shows him becoming ostracized and, you know, trying to clear his name, trying to redeem himself. And I thought that was a really extraordinary journey because, you know, Luke has always been true blue. You know, he's been, you know, the hero of the Rebel Alliance, the man who blew up the Death Star, the man who faced Darth Vader and lived to tell the tale. And it's really fascinating to see him out of favor with the Alliance, to see him, you know, as they say in the comic, as a pariah, you know, as someone reduced to a nobody who everybody hates. And, you know, it tests him, you know, it tests him emotionally, it pushes him. And it's quite a journey he goes on. Pick it up, it's a great read. The whole series of original Star Wars Marvel comics, they're great. And I think some of them have, if not all of them, have been recollected. Excuse me while I take another sip of water. Video game. Just like with the books, I'm not a big gamer. But, you know, I do really like Star Wars arcade games. If any of you know the Avalon in Portland on Southeast Belmont, there is a very, very cool game there. I've had some fun shooting AT-ATs, although on the Battle of Hoth level, but I admit that I'm not too good at it. By the way, Portlanders, please smack me in the face for saying Southeast Belmont, because there is no other Belmont than Southeast Belmont. It's just Belmont. So, whew, I'm a native Portlander. I should be better about that kind of thing. But, okay, final thing. Toy. I'm going to have to cheat and do a couple. Back when I was first getting into Star Wars, there was a great antique store in town called Shadow House Collectibles. And my friend who got me into Star Wars, he told me about a Boba Fett action figure that was there. You know, an older Boba Fett action figure, you know, still in the package, all that stuff. And actually, it had some other stuff too, which I'll show you in a sec. But I went there and got it, and it's my favorite toy. Where are we here? Let's see. Okay. Here he is. I'm a big fan of Boba Fett, as you can tell, I'm sure. And, you know, just because, you know, I'm already getting really geeky and childish, why don't I get more geeky and childish? You got some cool stuff here. You can remove the jetpack, you can remove the cape, and you can have him, you know, with different looks. No jetpack, you know, or, you know, jetpack and no cape. You know, wow, this is getting really, really nerdy and childish. But, you know, come on, you know, if you're a fan, you get where I'm coming from. You know, this stuff is so much fun. I'm gonna stick the cape back on now. Oh, but that's not all that came in this. You know, also a little IG-88. For the uninitiated, you know, you may remember him as one of the robot bounty hunters back from The Empire Strikes Back. Very fun droid. He can pivot at the waist. Ooh, he's dancing. And also they came with a comic book, you know, Shadows of the Empire comic book. So it's kind of cool. Shadows of the Empire was a whole kind of multimedia event, you know, for those of you who don't know. It took place between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. Okay, whew. I got through the whole, you know, multi-part question. Let's see. Let me see. Bear with me a moment. I'm trying to remember what the other question was. Let me just boot up my computer. I have how written down in my notes. How what? I'm not sure. Oh. I can't believe I forgot that one. It's a really good one. How has Star Wars impacted your life? I mean, where to begin? You know, Star Wars took me from, you know, being someone who was very casually interested in movies, you know, to someone who was reading the reviews and wanting to engage with, you know, what was coming out each year. You know, it's Star Wars. You know, I was already a movie fan, but, you know, Star Wars helped me take my movie fandom to the next level. And movies to me are just some of the most amazing and beautiful things out there in this universe. So I owe that partly to Star Wars. Having discovered that was my passion, being a film critic. But more than that, I don't know. I mean, I guess Star Wars, to be honest, it informs a lot of my values. I mean, I'm not a religious person, but I do believe that anyone, whether you're religious or not, I believe faith is essential to your life. I believe we all have to have faith in something greater than ourselves. And for me, a big part of why I love Star Wars is that it comes back to wow, I'm actually getting choked up describing this. See if I can keep it together. But that scene in The Empire Strikes Back when Yoda says, look at me, judge me by my size, do you? And well, you should not. For my ally is the Force, and a powerful ally it is. Life feeds it, makes it grow. Luminous beings are we, not this crude matter. Luminous beings are we, not this crude matter. I think that's just one of the most extraordinary and beautiful things. And Star Wars to me, is really about belief. About believing that there's something greater than ourselves. People, I think, and let me back up. I mean, again, Luke, believing that he can redeem his father. Han Solo believing that it will make a difference. If he doesn't go off and pay job with that, and then instead turns around to help his friends, to join with them, to do something for the greater good. I mean, Darth Vader, believing that even after all the hurt he's caused, it won't matter. It won't matter if he saves his son's life, if he destroys the Emperor, if he brings balance to the Force. Star Wars for me is about the wonder, is about the hope of that. Wow, I really am getting choked up now. It's okay. It's okay. It's just the rain. It's just the rain. There's no rain, but whatever. You look at that scene in the trench run, the Death Star trench run at the end of A New Hope. Luke is caught up in the machinery, using his targeting computer, getting ready to fire on the Death Star. And suddenly, that binary sunset music, da, 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 comes back, and you hear Obi-Wan saying, "Use the Force, Luke." And suddenly you see that graceful POV shot of the walls of the Death Star trench rushing by, and suddenly everything feels graceful and beautiful, and Luke chooses to believe in something beyond himself. And as a result, he saves the lives of a lot of people. He does this extraordinary thing, And, I mean, look, Star Wars is vast. Star Wars is vast. It's a big, big galaxy. There are a lot of reasons to love it. But at the end of the day, a lot of what I love about it comes down to that. And then beyond that, really just, again, the complexity, That first film was really a story of good versus evil. But there's that little scene where Aunt Beru says to Uncle Owen, Luke has too much of his father in him, and Uncle Owen says, "That's what I'm afraid of," kind of hinting at a more complicated reality and the fall of Anakin Skywalker and Darth Vader, and the fact that, an evil man may not necessarily be entirely evil, just as a good man may not be necessarily entirely good. And, you think about that, that's a really beautiful thing to say, because, if we're not all simply good and evil, if we're all somewhere in the middle, then we all have the capacity to act on the good, to bring something better to this world. I wouldn't say Star Wars taught me that, I mean, I don't really think I necessarily get a lot of my values from movies. I don't necessarily watch movies, to learn, I watch them to be swept away, to be thrilled and moved, My values my values I get just from my own personal experiences, and also, more importantly, from my parents, my family, the way they live their lives. That's where I get inspiration for that. But Star Wars, I mean, I do think that, that I believe in the values that it preaches, and that I feel them, and I root for them, and I think they mean something, and they've certainly meant something to my life, just as this entire big and beautiful thing George Lucas created has ever since, I first, watched it way back when. Well, I think that about wraps it up. If you want to do a tag like this, if you want to do a My Star Wars Story tag, again, please check out all the questions. I've listed them down in the description of this video. Please, use the tag My Star Wars Story. And also, please, if you make one of these, share it with me. Tweet to me at, my Twitter handle is at T.H.O. BENNETT. And I'll throw that in the description of the video as well. I'd love to hear all of you, why, what kind of Star Wars fan you are, what, Star Wars means to you. I think this, could be a really cool thing, and a way for all of us to, again, reaffirm our common purpose as fans, because whatever our disagreements, we're in this together, we all love Star Wars, we all care deeply about this franchise, and that's something that should unite us. So, to wrap up, if you liked this video, and why wouldn't you, please click thumbs up and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Don't forget to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at T.H.O. Movie Reviews. Don't forget to check out all the great reviews and content we have at THOmoviereviews.wordpress.com. Once again, I'm your host, Bennett Campbell Ferguson. I'm here alone today to shake things up. And from, I guess, just me at T.H.O. Movie Reviews, happy movie watching, and may the Force be with you.